Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the future of immigration and the use of foreign nationals in a new COVID-19 world, presented by Keith Pabian. I'm Selena Mendieta, Meeting Events Manager at HFTP. Please remember that if you are collecting continuing education credit today, you will need to self-report your credit for this webinar through your HFTP account. Today we welcome Keith Pabian, founding partner of Pabian Law, LLC, a national immigration law firm headquartered in Massachusetts that focuses on assisting employers through the visa and immigration process. Keith has a unique specialization in representing employers from coast to coast in the hospitality industry. Keith regularly presents at national conferences, local chapter meetings, and on webinars on immigration topics affecting the hospitality industry. He has received numerous awards for his success in providing solutions to employers' most pressing staffing issues. Keith is a proud member of HFTP and a past board member of the HFTP New England chapter. Thanks for being with us today, Keith. With that, I will hand the floor over to you to begin your presentation.
All right, thanks, Selena, and hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I really appreciate you joining, or I should say having me today, and really appreciate HFTP for inviting me to speak. This was one of the hardest webinars to put together because really talking about the future is so difficult right now when it comes to immigration. So what I want to do is just kind of go through what we're hearing, what we might see, and I think just one thing to note is that I was saying to Selena before we started that there might end up needing to be a part 2 to this because as you're going to see, there's so many potential changes out there, but so little information at the moment. So my job today is to tell you kind of what we're seeing, what we're hearing, but what you're going to see and hear over the next bit here is that there's a lot of unknown coming. So with that, let's get into this. So Selena did a great job telling you about us. Basically, we're all over the country working with hotels, resorts, private clubs, and ski areas on the H-2B side, and then we do year-round visas and green card options as well. So been working with HFTP now for, I think, well over 10 years, and a really, really nice partnership. So when I've been doing anything relating to COVID, I've been starting with this slide because I think that it's really helpful just to set the stage for what's happening right now. So right now, what's happening from an immigration standpoint in the United States? And basically, right now, things are starting to, I would say, move towards the better. Some of the initiatives that were aimed at protecting government officials' health, such as closing the consulates and embassies or suspending premium processing, which is expedited filing, those are starting to come back as the wave is starting to dissipate a little bit. They never shut down immigration. There were definitely so many rumors that circulated over the last 3 months. And so along the way, they've been processing petitions. We've been seeing approvals the entire way on every visa type. And I think that the biggest negative right now is just the varying processing times and the unpredictability because there is no option to fast track a petition. But other than that, the way I would phrase it right now is that if you want a foreign national here, you're generally able to get them here or have them here in the sense that when you're ready, I think that the border crossings are going to be ready as well. There might be a little bit of a lag, which we're going to get into, but things right now are relatively going smoothly. I'm much more, I'd say, bullish about where things are right now than I was 2 weeks ago, just as we're starting to see things really starting to get better and opening. That being said, what's changed since mid-March? And I kind of look at mid-March as when the bottom dropped out and when really from an immigration standpoint, so much did change. So here's what's changed. And I put underneath on some of these bullet points because things have changed in the last couple of weeks that kind of counter the changes that happened since mid-March. So premium processing is a service that the government offers for about $1,400 extra in government filing fees to review and adjudicate a petition in 15 calendar days. One of the things that the government did early on when COVID broke out and they started to have people working remotely or not as many people at their centers is they turned off expedited processing, this premium processing route. On Friday, they just announced that it was coming back. And this is huge because it allows us to tell clients when things are going to be coming. So we are very excited about that. It's going to be a few weeks before it's fully back on, but the fact that that's coming back shows that they're starting to staff up a little bit, or I shouldn't say staff up, but bringing people back to the office, and allowing us to tell clients how long to expect for their visa petitions to be processed. Additionally, consulates and embassies around the world, which are the entities that issue visas, they're starting to reopen and schedule appointments. We started to see a couple of weeks ago some of the consulates and embassies issuing opportunities for foreign nationals to get visas through if they were eligible for interview waivers. So some people who have been to the United States before in some countries are able to bypass the in-person interview and get their visas through the mail. But what we're also seeing right now over the last 2 weeks is that some consulates and embassies, including some in Jamaica and elsewhere, are starting to schedule appointments in the month of June. Now, in the meantime, land borders are closed currently. So the border between Canada and the U.S., as well as Mexico and the U.S., both of those have been closed for over a month now, and they extended it for another month about a week ago. Now, importantly, there's a million exceptions to this, and I think that there's definitely some misunderstandings surrounding what this looks like. Essentially, what they're trying to do is stop tourists and visitors from going back and forth. But there's a lot of exceptions for citizens, as well as if you're flying, this closure doesn't affect you. But they're just trying to keep COVID at bay. This is purely a COVID thing, not a political thing. And hopefully those will start to come back as then countries really are seeing the number of cases drop. One of the things that was so challenging for our hospitality clients was the closures of international borders and airports. This was constantly changing. In one of the last slides in this slide deck, I have a lot of resources, including, it's weird to say this, but one of the best sources of information on international border closures was this Al Jazeera article that I linked to that gives you some good information. We're starting to see some of these also lift, and that's very, very important, especially if you still have workers stuck in the United States. And so we're starting to see those change as well. Closure of U.S. government offices, which led to suspension of green card interviews, citizenship interviews. Those are opening on what's today? On Thursday, June 4th, I think is Thursday. And so in the United States, they're going to resume in-person interviews, which is huge. So if you have any foreign nationals that are in the green card or citizenship process, those will start to move forward again. In the meantime, the backdrop to all of this is high unemployment, which is also caused by many of you or your colleagues doing reductions in force, layoffs, furloughs, and so on. Obviously, that led to a lot of things that I've spoken to that extensively, including through some HFTP webinars. But that caused a lot of problems, and this high unemployment is the backdrop to what I'm going to be talking about for the majority of this webinar. Because with high unemployment comes the fact that there's a perception that should the U.S. workers get the jobs before any foreign nationals. And we're going to talk about that. Now, that led to President Trump's executive action, which happened about a month ago on April 22nd. That was very helpful that I put in that date. And so what happened was, this was in reaction to President Trump tweeting right as I was going to bed on a Monday night that they were going to be suspending all immigration to the United States. I'm going to talk about what happened in a few slides because it's instructive to see what might come. But essentially, they walked back on President Trump's tweet, and they essentially it essentially turned into a non-event, other than scaring the crap out of a lot of people, myself included. But what it did is, when they finally signed the executive action into law, it was just a 60-day suspension of some very limited green card applications that are filed through U.S. consulates and embassies abroad. Now, I keep saying this when I talk about this to clients and to others, that in effect, they did nothing. And I think they were just trying to show that they were doing something after President Trump tweeted this. What I've heard since, and I've been reading up on this a lot and listening to endless sources of content on this, he took the agencies by surprise. They had been kind of talking about this at a high level, but nothing was done, and they weren't ready for it. And so when they ultimately did something to show that they were doing something in response to this tweet, they had to do something, but they essentially did something that did nothing because the consulates and embassies were already closed. And so it was a lot to do about absolutely nothing. It did nothing to affect any of our work with our hospitality clients, H-2B visas, J-1 visas, H-1B visas, green card applications. Those were not touched whatsoever, and it's been business as usual since that all happened. However, in the executive order, they instructed the agencies to speak with one another and come to the Trump administrations with recommendations. And that has led to a lot of the rumors that we're going to talk about today. And that's probably the biggest thing that happened. Now, in the meantime, a couple of other things that happened over the last week. The Trump administration is definitely targeting Chinese nationals. And one thing I'm going to do over the course of this webinar is really try not to speak to one side or the other from a political standpoint. I'm just going to try to stay right down the middle here. But they're definitely targeting Chinese nationals. Two things that happened over the weekend. One is that optional practical training, which we're going to talk about again in a bit, is this work authorization status that F1 student visa holders get. So basically, what the government did many years ago is they said, if you're coming here as a foreign national to study either in an undergrad or graduate program, you can get a year of work authorization to work in a field that's related to your major, to your field of study. There's also a way, if you work in a STEM field, to work for actually 3 years rather than the one. And it basically allows organizations to almost get a flyer on people and almost do a test drive, for lack of a better phrase, before they actually have to sponsor them for work authorization. Over the weekend, the Trump administration put limits on Chinese nationals with ties to the Chinese military on utilizing this optional practical training program. And so that happened over the weekend, as well as they said that Hong Kong is no longer going to be considered separate from mainland China, which has some massive implications for those that are born in Hong Kong. It adds potentially over 10 years onto their green card route if you're sponsoring them for a green card. Hong Kong used to be separate, and mainland China is subject to massive green card backlogs. And so Hong Kong nationals are now going to be subject to those backlogs, which is not great. Not great if you're from Hong Kong, I should say. So in the meantime, is immigration to the U.S. still possible? And the answer is yes. There's definitely this misunderstanding by many right now that you can't do any immigration to the U.S. And when I say immigration, I mean visas, green cards, citizenship. All of that is possible today. All of that has been possible throughout this entire crisis. Nothing has changed substantively. But, and here's where we're going to get into some really interesting conversation from my side, in my view, because this is what we do. What could be coming and why? Okay, so before I get into this, a couple of ground rules as I go through this. None of us are going to get freaked out. None of us are going to run screaming out of our houses or offices, but I want to go through a lot of the rumors that are out there, because there are so many rumors out there, because it does seem like something's coming, and I want to talk through what's likely versus not likely. But what I'm going to do over the course of the rest of this webinar is really go through the rumors that I'm hearing, and to be clear, when I talk about rumors, there's substance to them. There's absolutely a lot happening right now behind the scenes, and I want to talk about what that is, what that could look like for your organization, and so But before we get into the meat, let's do our first poll of the day. So the first poll, and Billy's going to open it up, I think, as I'm talking. Are you worried, for your organization, are you worried about potential changes to U.S. immigration laws during or as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic? So let's do this first poll. Okay. So the vast majority of you are, which makes sense because you're listening to this webinar. Billy, do I need to do anything to show the results, or is everyone able to see the results? Okay. So based on this first poll, 88% of you are worried about potential changes. And as you're going to hear, I think that's warranted as we're going through this. So, okay. Before we do this, I just want to talk a little bit about the why, because if we understand the why, I think it might help you to not be so worried as we go forward. Okay. So here is President Trump's approval ratings going back to 2017. And as you can see, in mid-May, and really in the first quarter, his approval ratings just took a nosedive. There was a lot of criticism about his response to COVID-19. And that led to his approval ratings going to what looked like to be essentially an all-time low for him during his presidency. Now, in the midst of that, and this is a Washington Post poll, there was broad support for temporarily blocking nearly all immigration to the U.S. during the coronavirus outbreak. I was trying to find a graph to show what his approval ratings would look like when he talks about immigration, but I think you can see what we're talking about here. So overall, 65% of people think that, and to be clear, I think this is really important to say, this was during the absolute height of the pandemic, April 21st to 26th, when I think it felt like the world was ending for a lot of us. Like it just felt like just something none of us had ever seen before. But overall, 65% of people thought to turn off immigration. 83% of Republicans, that's a huge number. 67% of independents, which is kind of those people that swing, that he's very much going after in the election. About half of Democrats, which is interesting because you can see the broad support. Now, we don't know why, right? This question is missing one question, or missing a follow-up question. And the question is what we're about to do the poll on. Okay, so here's the second poll that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. Okay, if U.S. immigration were suspended, do you think it should be due to high unemployment, protecting against the spread of the virus, or both? And in terms of both, immigration laws as a result of the pandemic. Okay, so, or all of the above. So if you can respond now. Okay, so most of you think, well, I said, overall you're split. Okay, so about half of you think it's protecting against the spread of the virus. About half of you think both due to high unemployment and protecting against the spread of the virus. From my standpoint, and this is interesting, it was an interesting thought for me to have this self-realization. On April 21st, whenever that poll was done, I said to my wife that I actually thought they should have closed the borders. But I said that more from a virus standpoint. I was worried that I thought going back to mid-March, if they closed the borders earlier, I think they could have prevented the spread a little bit better and a lot more, including the state borders. Now, from a job standpoint, when you read a lot of the studies, and obviously there's going to be two sides of this, but there are a lot of studies that show immigration helps the economy bounce back. It helps it grow. I continue to hear from so many of our clients that they can't find American workers to do jobs. And so I don't know that it makes sense to me personally about the high unemployment rate. But regardless, President Trump knows that, going back to this slide here, his base absolutely agrees with the messaging about turning off immigration, as well as the independent base that he's chasing after in an election year. So as we're getting into what's coming with potential changes, just remember that we're going to be hearing about immigration up until the election. And the reason why is President Trump knows that he has an audience for this. He knows that it helps his ratings because there are a lot of statistics. Again, I couldn't get a graph on this, but he knows that when he talks about limiting immigration, his approval ratings go up. So we're not done hearing about this. And it's going to be a theme as we go forward. But what's happening, and this is what happened in response to that infamous tweet that happened in April, is that he has two advisors in the room, or two thoughts, two viewpoints that he listens to. So he has Jared Kushner and Stephen Miller. Okay, and this is what happened, and this is what is still happening, and is probably going to happen up until the election. Okay, so we have the Jared Kushner viewpoint, which is the side that we hear a lot about in hospitality world, which is Trump has clubs and hotels that use foreign nationals. Why would he make changes? Trump's properties use H-2Bs, they use H-1Bs. One of the really interesting things about that suspension of that certain type of green cards in the executive action is they carved out an exception for this EB-5 investment green card route that most of you don't utilize. But why I'm mentioning that is the Kushner family uses a lot of EB-5s. That's a big investment method for them to fund a lot of their projects. So that's the Kushner model, which is you need immigration in the United States because it benefits not only them, but it benefits businesses. Now, Stephen Miller viewpoint, which is a close advisor of Trump, is very anti-immigration. He's basically turned off immigration. He references this notion of chain migration a lot, which is basically when you bring in a foreign national, it leads to further family members coming in and staying, and it just keeps things going. So there's this big infighting right now in the White House going between these two. And when I say infighting, I don't know that it rises to actual arguments, but there are these two sides that are kind of have an ear of President Trump, one on each ear. In the last executive action, the Kushner side won. They beat out the Miller side. They really didn't touch the things that allow all of us in the hospitality world to staff with foreign nationals. We'll see where we go from here. Just know that Stephen Miller is a close advocate, advisor to Donald Trump. He's going to continue to have his ear. It's going to be interesting to see how much balance happens between these two sides. Okay, so here, let's go through the various rumors of the different types of visas that our hospitality clients utilize. Okay. Oh, one last thing. These are all rumors. Okay, so none of these have been implemented just yet. Okay, so the H-1B is the most common type of visa. It's a year-round visa. You can get it for up to 3 years. It's the visa that's used the most because there's no prerequisites in terms of someone having worked at the company before. You just have to prove that the job requires a bachelor's degree and that the person has a bachelor's degree or higher in a field of study that relates to the job that he or she will be doing. Okay. Now, the H-1B visa is one that gets written about a lot. It's one that that anti-immigration people talk a lot about in the sense that it's kind of the most visible type of visa. In the hospitality world, I know we talk a lot about H-2Bs, but in the greater American workforce, H-1Bs are much more utilized, much more common. So some changes that are being talked about right now is only allowing people that are deemed essential and doing essential jobs to enter the United States if they have H-1Bs. When you file for H-1Bs, you have to use a prevailing wage, which is the average wage paid to people in that geographic area doing that job. When we do H-1Bs, you use a 4-tier wage system. Wage level 1 is an entry-level wage. Wage level 4 is like if someone has the most education that person could ever get and the most experience that person could ever get. One of the rumors that's been going on is that they might require anyone using H-1B holders to utilize the level 4 wage, which would be very strange because it would inflate wages and it would create this weird disparity between Americans and foreign nationals. Forcing recruitment to be part of the application process is another one. Right now, when we do H-1Bs, it's interesting because I say this a lot to clients. You can have a line wrapping around your organization for miles of Americans that are qualified and want to do the job, but it's irrelevant. There's no recruitment that's mandated as part of this. One potential change would be forcing that to start happening. Another rumor that's been going on, and this one has gained a lot of traction, so I think out of all of the ones on here, I think this is the most likely, is right now, if someone has an H-1B and they reach a certain milestone in the green card process, their spouses can apply for work authorization. Now, the work authorization they can apply for, and it allows them to work for any employer in any job. And so basically, they could go into the local McDonald's and work. This is a real easy target for anti-immigration people because it's easy to say that it's taking away a U.S. job. And so as part of these rumored changes, they're talking about suspending this employment authorization opportunity for H-1B spouses. The downside of this is that a lot of these people have to wait, in some cases, 20 years to get a green card. And if the spouses can't work, that just is awful. A lot of them just feel trapped. So these are the changes here. Now, when I'm talking about the changes, one of the other things just to mention before we keep going on is that where we're expecting to see some of these changes is in the next executive action in response to the first. I think minimally they're going to extend the existing order because I think that's the easy thing to do. But we're hearing rumors that they might add more into this. So again, out of all of these, I think the bottom one is most likely here. The reason why I don't think you're going to see, or I shouldn't say that. The reason why I think that there's hope that other changes won't be implemented is that some of the country's largest companies, whether we're talking about Apple, Amazon, IBM, some of the giant consulting companies, heavily utilize H-1Bs. And they're going to have big opinions and big lobbying money to prevent these changes. And that's what's happening now, is there are a lot of lobbying efforts on the H-1B side to not have these changes come into play. Okay, now OPT and CPT. So OPT I mentioned before is this work authorization that's available to foreign students. OPT happens after they finish their studies. CPT happens during. So OPT is full-time work after they graduate. CPT is part-time work while they're still studying. What's interesting here is that I'm frankly shocked that these are being talked about, but these are also gaining a lot of traction. We're here. The most recent rumors that I'm hearing are that these could be that this is kind of being spotlighted. And the idea being that these are, people that are graduating from undergrad or master's degree program, they're still pretty entry level. These are jobs that could be being taken away from Americans is the other side of it, is the argument for limiting things. And so whether they take away this extra time that are for STEM grads, so science, technology, engineering, and math, they can get 3 years of OPT time. Maybe they take away that extra period and only allow for the initial year, or maybe they turn off OPT and CPT in its entirety due to COVID. Now, in the meantime, there's going to be some giant lobbying money going on here because, and I've read a lot of articles about this, because universities and colleges, as all of us know, charge way too much money for enrollment. And because they charge so much money, very few people can afford to pay those bills, and so there's a lot of financial aid. The people that pay full price are the foreign nationals, and obviously some other wealthy individuals. But they rely on foreign nationals to fund these campuses, and as all of us know, or have seen, that the campuses just keep getting crazier and crazier in terms of the buildings, the student recreation centers, and so on. And so the colleges and universities, if they turn off OPT and CPT, they're going to lose foreign nationals from coming in and studying here. Interestingly, the United Kingdom actually just brought back their OPT program, and they have a leader that's very much aligned with the Trump view. But they just brought this back because I think that the colleges and universities really are pushing this issue that they need these international students. Okay, the L1 visa is for the organization. I see this most with HFTP organizations when they are part of some of the larger hotel chains or maybe an international hotel group. But what it is premised on is that international companies, meaning that companies or organizations that have at least a U.S. entity and then at least one foreign entity, have the ability to move managers and executives or those that have specialized knowledge of the company if they've been working in one of those capacities for at least a year. I've never seen L1 changes proposed before. This is usually one that that stays out of the immigration narrative. It's kind of just out there that just continues to exist. But we're starting to see L1s included in terms of potential reform. And so again, I'm going to talk about what might hold this back on the next slide. But just like with the H-1B spouses, L1 spouses are eligible to apply for work authorization and work for any employer. They don't have to wait any period of time. So if someone transfers here as a manager, executive, or someone who has specialized knowledge, their husband or wife can immediately apply for work authorization to work for any U.S. employer. This is where they're talking about turning that off, and I've seen this gaining some traction over the last couple of weeks, and I see this as a real threat coming up. Now, again, just like with H-1Bs, some of the country's largest companies rely on L1s, and there's a lot of big lobbying money that's going to go into this. Because if you tell some of these giant companies that have a lot of political clout that they can't move their executives and managers here, they're going to have a lot to say about that. But again, the work authorization for the spouses, that I think is a much easier conversation to be had. It's going to be received kind of across the board a lot easier, and I think that's really at risk. Okay, a lot of you use J1s. And there's rumors that have really been picking up over the last 2 weeks that this might be in play in terms of changes. Specifically, I'm hearing they might suspend J1s. Now, I think this is credible for a couple of reasons. Number one is that the U.S. Department of State, to their credit, I think really stepped up more than any of the other government agencies in late March and early April in trying to protect people here on J1s. They got really involved. They put in a lot of protectionist measures. For those that have heard me speak about this, J1s are really, I know a lot of you might use them, especially if you're a summer organization, you might use them to fill some real work needs. But in reality, the visa was created for trainees. It was created for these young individuals to come here, right after college, learn something that's related to what they've studied and go back to their home country to utilize it and spread this idea that the U.S. is great. Now, J1s are very big. There's a lot of subcategories under J1s, and in the hospitality industry, you generally only see two kinds. You either see the summer work and travel kids that are here for about 4 months, or you see the intern group that's here for 12 to 18 months. But this is really a target. In terms of what could prevent this, I'm worried here because the J1 visa was something that for some reason President Trump was campaigning on during his leading up to the last election. Like, this was something that he was already targeting. I'm concerned because the State Department really was looking to protect people. And I don't know that there's really strong lobbying groups here that have a huge leg to stand on, especially if you're talking about either stopping the spread of COVID or taking jobs away from Americans. So we'll see where this goes, but this is something that I'm watching really closely. If they do turn it off, I would be shocked if there aren't some exceptions. like I said, the J1 is a big visa. There's a lot more to it than just what I was referencing. But there are like J1 physicians that come over, and I expect to see some exceptions if they turn off J1s to allow certain J1 holders to come in. But that is one that I am worried about. Okay, H-2B visa changes, and a lot of you also use H-2Bs. About a month ago or so, there were 4 Republican senators that sent a letter to President Trump urging him to turn off H-2Bs for an entire year. Similarly, in that same letter, they also asked for H-1Bs to be turned off for a year. The question then becomes, would it be, if they got their way, would it be turned off for everyone? If people are already here, would they be allowed to stay? There's also been talk about substantive changes to the H-2B program, so for example, like enhanced advertising initiatives. Now, it remains to be seen if any of these will come to fruition. But I was very worried about the H-2B program when I saw that letter come across, frankly, because the H-2B is a seasonal visa application for what the government deems to be unskilled workers, meaning that you don't have to have a bachelor's degree. And so, I think that the narrative is kind of easy here that essentially 1 in 4 Americans is currently unemployed. Why wouldn't they want to go work at a hotel, a country club, a landscaping company, a crab fishing organization, and so on? Why wouldn't they want to go do one of those jobs to bring in a paycheck? Now, here's the good news, because I'm not as worried as I was a month ago, and I'm starting to actually feel a lot better about H-2Bs in terms of the Trump administration. Number one is, as I said before, Trump uses them. That always is helpful to remember. Number 2 is many industries across the country heavily utilize H-2B visas. And what is helpful here is that they're in red and blue states, and so there's bipartisan support for H-2B visas. There's also bipartisan support against H-2B visas. The Republicans and Democrats on both sides love them and hate them. But in response to that letter that got a lot of press because it was so out there with major changes, in the last 2 to 4 weeks, separately, a group of Republican senators and a group of Republican House members sent separate letters to President Trump asking him to not touch the program. They explained why, they explained how important it is. And frankly, more people signed on to those 2 letters than the letter that was initially sent that was asking for widespread change. In addition to that, we're still hearing of every day of our clients that just cannot find workers, even with unemployment as it is. And I actually think that, to their credit, H-2B organizations, both in and outside of hospitality, have done a great job of coming together and having some really great lobbyists helping. And your voices continue to be heard. And so I'm very confident that your voices are being heard right now. Now, like I said, that Republican letter asked for them to turn H-2B visas off. The other side is keeping it on, but changing the regulations. And here is where I don't know how they would necessarily do that, because they just changed the laws in 2015. And when they did that, they made them very protectionist for U.S. workers. So I don't really know what enhanced advertising would look like if they did that, or additional regulations. I think it's going to be easier for them just not to touch H-2Bs. And frankly, even though I think a lot of us know a lot about H-2Bs, the greater U.S. population doesn't know what an H-2B visa is. They don't run into this. And so I think if they're trying to get the narrative out that they need to do something about immigration to help Trump's approval ratings, I think they might look at other things that aren't so politicized, where you have people on both sides of the aisles that are pro and against it, and where, frankly, none of you can find the workers that you need if you're in any sort of seasonal location. Again, lobbying efforts are absolutely underway, and they've already borne fruit in the sense that I've seen more support coming out for H-2Bs than I've seen for any of the other visa types that have been discussed. Finally, rumored USCIS fee hike. So USCIS stands for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. They are the U.S. immigration agency. They are running out of money. It's a fee-based agency. They don't get any tax dollars. All of their money, it comes from the petitions that are filed. They keep suspending premium processing. Again, they just brought that back, but they make millions of dollars through that program, and they keep turning it off, sometimes politically, for political reasons. And they just came out in the last few weeks saying that they're running out of money. I think they're going to raise the fees. They actually announced yesterday what they're looking at, and I don't even know that it's going to affect the hospitality industry. It looks like initially it's really going to affect citizenship applications, some L1 applications, and they're going to start for the first time charging asylees, which is a little bit ridiculous. But I don't know that you're going to see some changes on petitions that your industry generally files. Okay, with any changes though, exceptions are all but certain. So farm workers, there's a huge shortage of people to pick crops right now, and to work in the meat industry. They've already carved out a lot of exceptions for farm workers, for foreign nationals. In addition, one of the things that made me feel really good about H-2Bs was about a week or two after that Republican letter came out, following the last executive action, the Trump administration came out and made exceptions to allow for easier processing of people coming in to work in H-2B status to support the global, the U.S. food supply chain. Meaning that in the face of all of this, they're seeing that H-2B visas are needed, and they continue to make exceptions for that. Things that are deemed essential, I'm positive are going to keep having carve-outs. So like the health industry, the food supply industry, farming, I think you're going to keep seeing exceptions for that. And I think you might see exceptions for those already in the U.S. A lot of times when the administration announces changes, it really only affects those coming in. So if you're getting people that are already here through transfer petitions, it might not affect them. All right, so with that, let's do the last poll of the day, which is which visa type, if suspended, would be most impactful to your organization? Okay, so thank you. So what I'm seeing is 29% said H-1B visas, 57% said H-2B visas, and 14% said J-1 visas. So here's the good news. Things have really started to shift. When the last executive action came out, and people were already starting to look towards what additional changes might come, H-1Bs and H-2Bs were front and center in terms of changes. I've seen things shifting now, and now it looks like OPT, that optional practical training program, and J-1s are the ones that are really being discussed, as well as work authorization for spouses. So for the person the organization that is most impacted by J-1s, I think you might have some things to worry about, but I'm less worried about H-2Bs and H-1Bs than I was a month ago. Obviously, I don't know. I'm just trying to follow the rumors that are out there, but time will certainly tell. Okay. Looking ahead, how to handle staffing right now with foreign nationals in this environment, and in HFTP, so many of you are seasonal. For summer season, I think for this summer, definitely reach out to me if you're still trying to get people here from overseas for this summer. It's starting to look like it's going to be possible with embassies and consulates opening and borders opening. I can certainly walk you through what that would look like. That being said, if you utilize H-2Bs, we start working on those in mid-September. And so as we're heading into late summer, early fall, it's going to be really interesting in trying to predict next summer, especially if the timelines for vaccines are accurate. By next summer, we might have a vaccine and you might have the best summer ever after having your worst summer ever. And just trying to understand what that looks like from a staffing standpoint is going to be interesting. For winter season, we're already a couple of months into working on winter season petitions for H-2B visas. A lot of you are starting to really, most of you wanted to continue to do H-2Bs. We heard from some clients recently that initially were either trying to delay or told us that they weren't going to move forward, that have expressed interest again because they're seeing occupancy going up and even some groups coming back, which is wonderful to hear. So we're definitely seeing demand for foreign nationals for the winter. For year-round organizations, And that's really where H-1Bs come into play and green cards. For those of you that sponsor people, you're usually sponsoring them in fields that I think the U.S. education system just doesn't do a great job of teaching. And so usually you need to turn to foreign nationals to do that job. We have a separate set of our practice that works with tech companies, and we're still really busy. They're still filing and sponsoring foreign nationals in large numbers because they can't find Americans to do those jobs. Unemployment actually went down during COVID for people in computer industries, which is crazy to me, in the midst of unemployment going up for everyone else. So, basically what I'm saying is I think that it's really clear that foreign nationals have a really important place here as you're trying to run your organizations, which is certainly making me feel better as an immigration lawyer. What do you do if you already employ foreign nationals, meaning they're already on your team? These are my thoughts. Be open about communications. I think telling them about what's going on is really important in building that trust. Understand rumors versus truth, and be flexible with moving targets, because I think that's what we might be talking about going forward, is just some moving targets as some, maybe hopefully some minor changes happen rather than big substantive changes. But also understanding the rumors, because I think that's the scary part. Understanding what's true versus just a rumor can really give a lot more confidence. And then finally, showing that you care. After the last executive action, we actually did a company-wide conference call with one of our clients and all of their foreign nationals. And it was really just there to show that the company cared about them and that they had a resource. And I think that goes a long way. I use this example a lot, but we have close family friends that are here from the UK, and they're here on an L1 visa, and then the wife is working through the employment authorization. After the last executive action, he called me and said, we basically had this moment of, are you okay? Are you okay? But he said, the government doesn't want me here. I don't want to be here anymore. And it definitely hurts. And so the more that you're checking in and communicating and just showing that you're there for them, it really does mean a lot to them. And it's definitely something I would encourage you to do. Bringing this kind of to a conclusion of just takeaways and best practices, I encourage all of you to work with a lawyer rather than an agent as you're going forward. There's so much going on here, and there's so much risk if you're not using a lawyer. Be careful to pay attention to the world around us. And what I mean by that is understanding both politically what's going on, but also just, what is COVID looking like? Are we looking at another spike heading into the fall and winter? And how do you handle that if you employ foreign nationals? Because there's so much that you have to be thinking about if you have to do reductions in force, and just making sure that you understand what's going on, and looking forward with that. Understanding your organization's needs versus the desires and learning from the past 3 months, meaning, don't overcommit right now while there's so much unknown, but also knowing that you might need foreign nationals and just being smart about that. And most of all, be careful about what rumors you trust and what you're spreading, because I think that's definitely contributing to a lot of fear right now. I promise you a bunch of resources with a bunch of links, and hopefully you'll have access to this. If not, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share the slide deck with you as well as answer any questions you have. But this is a helpful resource document. We also, about weekly now, have a whole FAQ document that we keep updating, specifically on immigration impacts of COVID-19, and I'm happy to put you on that list if you want to be getting that document. That is me and my contact information. But with that, we have a little over 5 minutes to answer any questions that any of you might have. So I'll turn it over to Billy to moderate the questions.
Thanks, Keith. If you'd like to ask Keith a question, we do have some time here, so make sure that you're using the Q&A panel on your interface. We'll start with the first question, Keith, that came in, and it asks, when do we expect some of these changes to be implemented?
So that's a great question. So I was hearing last week from a lot of different, very reputable sources that the new executive action was set to go out, or was scheduled to go out this week. So it could literally be any second that some of these changes would be implemented. That being said, I think that the protests that are currently happening are definitely distracting the administration right now. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it goes into next week, but I think they're coming very, very soon.
Great answer. I don't see any other questions here. Any other thoughts before, while we wait for, questions to come in here, if there are any follow-ups?
Yeah, just to reiterate, I think that there's going to be a lot of really scary rumors heading, because so many of you rely on foreign nationals. I'm using the word scary because for us, if we can't have our foreign nationals, that's scary. I think we're going to keep hearing rumors as we head into the election. It's just really understanding what's true versus what's just something that's being discussed. I also think that there will be another executive action that comes out because minimally that extends it. But what I tried to do in this webinar is really just outline what we're hearing and what's out there. I don't expect the vast majority of them to be implemented. I think that it's likely to just be a couple of things. But hopefully I didn't scare all of you to death on this. I just wanted you to understand the rumors out there. But I'm expecting, a very small part of what we talked about today to actually be in the new executive action.
Great.
Okay, Keith, thank you so much, Keith. It looks like we don't have any more questions coming in at the moment, but I just want to thank you for all the great information, and thanks so much for being with us. Before we close today, I just want to offer a quick reminder to everybody about HFTP's Hangout series being offered live on Zoom each week. This week's lineup includes CBRE Hotel Outlook, coming out of the trenches. That is today at 2 p.m. Central Time. Tomorrow and Wednesday morning, Hangouts offers a discussion on making sure you are getting value out of your cloud services in today's environment at 9 a.m. Central Time. And then on Thursday, the HFTP Young Professional Advisory Council presents a session on professional development during COVID-19. Register for these Hangouts at hftp.org to attend. So with that, again, Keith, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for participating today. And that concludes today's broadcast.
Thank you so much.